Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest of the For Good Cause webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about better boardrooms, nonprofit boardrooms. This is a huge topic. Well, you hear this all the time from our clients. If you can have a better board, you're going to get more stuff done. You're going to raise more money. It's just going to be a better, effective nonprofit. We got a great guest speaker today, and can't wait for you guys to hear from her. First off, make sure everybody can see and hear us. Please say hello in the chat. I'll start that out there. Please let us know what organization you're from, where you're dialing in from. I'm coming in from Kennesaw, Georgia, just a little bit outside of Atlanta. Really appreciate you being here. I know how busy you are, so it means a lot that you're taking a little time for us to spend it on education and here listening to us. So we really appreciate it. Just a few housekeeping things. This is being recorded, so if you have to step away, no problem. I am going to send out a replay. If not tomorrow, I'll get that out on Friday for everybody. If you have questions, please post them in the chat. We'll be doing some Q&A at the end of the presentation, so stay tuned for that. Stay tuned also on the right. We've got some handouts and other things, links that will drop throughout the presentation just to give you some extra bonus resources. So be on the lookout for there as well. I'm going to get things started by just introducing myself and For a Good Cause. I'm Ronald Pruitt. I'm the president and founder of For a Good Cause. I've been helping nonprofits raise money online for it'll be 25 years in April. Very excited about that. Again, I'm coming to you from Kennesaw, Georgia. I live here with my wonderful wife, my awesome teenage son, my mother-in-law. She's across the hall from the home office here. We have another one that's at UGA. That's where Victoria is dialing in from today, Athens, Georgia. And For Good Cause, we're basically a fundraising CRM, specifically for small to mid-sized nonprofits. And nonprofits that use us see donation sizes double national averages, can typically pay back their investment in our software with a single donation every month. You can check us out at forgoodcause.com. I'm going to drop a little link to that here. If you're interested in more education, please go there, check out our blog, check out our webinar series, new ideas on fundraising techniques, and all the things that we do there. I hope that you will check that out. Now, on to our guest speaker, person that you really want to hear from today. I'm here welcoming Victoria Prevatt from Good Works Consulting.
Hi.
She is an expert in nonprofit boards and getting more engagement from them. You're in for a real treat today. You're going to learn a lot. I've done these kind of sessions with Victoria before. It's always enlightening. She's going to leave you with a lot of really practical takeaways. So I'm very excited to welcome you, Victoria. I'm going to turn things over to you. Just holler out when you need me to drop a handout or a link or anything like that for you in the chat room.
Oh, I got just a little bit nervous for a second. That's exciting. I love it. Yeah, Ronald and I met probably a year and a half or so ago through some work we did at the Community Foundation of Northeast Georgia. I'm going to share my slides with you. I think he's told me how to do this twice, so I'm going to do it. There we go. Let's see. Can y'all see that, everybody? Does that look right, Ronald? He's going to thumbs up me. If he can't see it, he'll tell me.
Yes, you look good.
All right, I look good. We all look good. It's great to see everybody. I saw a lot of familiar names on the registration list, so it's great to be with you guys today. My name is Victoria Prevatt. I'm here in Northeast Georgia in a sweet little college town, Athens, Georgia, home of the University of Georgia. And I started this business, Good Works, about in 2017, and my website is on here. We can drop that in the chat as well. And I've been working with and around and for and at and on nonprofits for about 20 years now. and have clients all around the Southeast. And I'm just excited to be with you guys today. We'll talk a little bit about what the plan is today. So I'll talk a little bit about very big picture. I always start off talking really big picture stuff with nonprofits, kind of orient us to the landscape that we're working in. And then we'll talk a little bit about board service. Why do people serve? What's the roles and responsibilities of board members? And then we'll get to the meat of it, which is the board meeting and how to design a good board meeting. I have several slides here, and I'd welcome your input and feedback and thoughts and ideas on what's working for you, what's not working for you. And then I looked at, Ronald sent me your questions. There's always questions about fundraising and philanthropy and how to engage the board in fundraising. So I did kind of a bonus round of a few slides so we can focus on that towards the end. And then I just welcome any ahas, curiosities, and questions at the end. So that's how we're going to get going. Okay, so very, very big picture. I like to start, we're going to really sort of zoom out and orient us to this world that we're all living in a little bit. So who am I? I'm a know thyself sort of person. So this is how I tend to frame it with folks. We have our public sector, which is our government. We have our private sector, which is our business world. And then we have what I'm on a mission to call the purpose sector, because I like the alliteration of that. But we go by a lot of different names. Nonprofit sector, I hear not-for-profit a lot, independent sector, social sector, charitable sector, voluntary sector. But we are unique from the public sector and private sector. We're partnering with them, obviously, but we have a very unique place. And we're very different than the public and private sector. And then I always feel like it's important to kind of understand where are we, kind of in space and time. So I like to share this slide even with with the boards that I work with, because I think it helps orient us even more to where are we in this moment in the nonprofit world. So nonprofits kind of came around in this industrial era back when we had our first true wealth in this country with the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. We moved into this independence era. We kind of stuck a flag in the ground. There was the Filer Commission. We got a 501c3 tax status. There was some legal stuff that separated and oriented us from the private sector and public sector. And then in the 90s and 2000s, we had the information era, right? This is when we had the World Wide Web, and there was a lot more scrutiny and watchdog groups, and we were very data driven. Our 990s became public record or became very transparent and on the internet. So we're very data driven, and we're now in what is called the impact era, which is what difference are we making in our community? And I think that can really help frame conversations in the boardroom. So that's really why I'm sharing it, just as a way to help frame this work a little bit. I use Meals on Wheels. I don't know if anyone in the room today or part of this is part of or has experience with Meals on Wheels, but Meals on Wheels is a great way to illustrate this point from information era to impact era. So in the information era, Meals on Wheels, it was really about how many meals did we deliver, how many volunteers did it take, how many doors did we walk through with a meal in hand. And then that has sort of shifted into how many people are eating those meals. Are those meals nutritious? Do the people we're serving have the appropriate, a microwave, a refrigerator? Are they able to keep their food safe? Are they able to heat up their food? So it's a very different way of approaching the work. And so I think it's an important way to frame the work that you're doing and to help your board understand that this is a little bit of a different space than just the data way that we sort of were brought up in, or that many of us were brought up in. Here is a wonderful report. You can find this online. I think Ronald has a link to it. It's called Nonprofit Impact Matters. It's free and online, and I'm just sharing it with you as a reference point and to give credit, where you'll see some of the next couple of slides that I share with you will be a little bit about from this report. So nonprofits by the numbers, we have about 1.5 million nonprofits registered with the IRS right now in this country. That's not everybody, because religious congregations and any organization that has less than 5,000 in gross receipts aren't required to file and register with the IRS. Many of them do, but they don't have to. So we actually have a lot more nonprofits than what's listed right here. And then this is just my sort of good stuff to know slide, just as, again, just as to be an expert in the work that we're doing. Most of our nonprofits are small, community-based, and serving local needs. About 88% of our nonprofits are spending less than $500,000 a year. So if you're an organization that's spending more than $500,000 a year, you're in the very small minority of nonprofits. Most of our nonprofits are very tiny. I think it's about 75% are spending less than $250,000 a year. However, we are small but mighty. We are the third largest employer behind retail and manufacturing, employing about 10% of our nation's workforce. And we reported about $6 trillion in assets according to recent tax returns. So it's just a real interesting thing to know and kind of explore and play with our staff and leadership teams and boards. We're small. 75% on operating on budgets of less than $250,000 a year. Yet, third largest employer in this country behind retail and manufacturing, huge amount of assets, huge economic impact in the communities that we're working in. So let's talk a little bit about boards. I think this is it's a unique and curious leadership structure. It is very unique from the private sector and the public sector because it is required by law in all 50 states that every single nonprofit right from its birth is required to have a board of directors. It's required to be governed by a board of directors. We do not see that in the private sector and public sector. So if I want to go out and open an ice cream shop on the east side of town, I can just go do that. But if I want to open a nonprofit, I have to go through a process, and that nonprofit has to be governed from birth by a board of directors. So that's a pretty interesting thing. What I have found more interesting, and this has been my aha moment, which has really led me down the path of work that I'm in right now, is that it is required in no state that those boards have any training. And there's no state that has any expectation that those boards are trained in what it means to be a board member. So that's really what we're here to do. That's kind of my soapbox, and what I am passionate about is how do we really train and educate our nonprofit leaders about what it means to be a board member. So that's a little bit just our big picture zoom out. I'm going to kind of move quickly into board service. And again, the meat of this will be about board meetings and designing board meetings. But I think it's important to kind of orient us a little bit to what is board service. I often use information and resources from this organization, Board Source. They're kind of the national experts in board governance and research. They put out a lot of wonderful just best practices, next practices. They do these leading with intent surveys and great research. They're based in Washington, D.C. If you're not following them on social media, they have a newsletter you can sign up for. They have a very affordable membership rate. And this is a little bit where I get my roles and responsibilities of board members. So why do people serve on a board? And I think this is really important. I'm sure we could put it all in the chat and everybody would know this intuitively. We understand why people serve on boards. However, there's a lot of academic research that supports this. People serve for professional reasons, personal reasons, and because they have a passion for a cause. They want to make a difference. They want to deep dive on an issue. They want some different level of professional development and an opportunity to build their network. They want community connections. They want to sharpen skills. They want leadership development. These are always the things that pop up in any kind of survey, any kind of research that's being done on why are people serving. But first and foremost, it is because I want to make a difference. I want to have a meaningful experience. I want to serve my community. And so my question is, with all of this research that is really, really consistent, and we are hearing the same things over and over and over again, is this the experience they're having when they show up in the boardroom? And what I'm finding is not so much, right? They raise their hand, they want to make a difference, they're wanting to deep dive on an issue, they're wanting to really dig in and explore their passion and help activate their value systems, and then they show up in a boardroom and these needs are not exactly being met. And so how do we begin to shift that and change that? And so I think about it like this. This is what I call my broken record slide. That's why I have the broken the broken record on there. These are things that I say in and around my community and with my clients so much that they're like, you sound like a broken record, which I take as a huge compliment. But I do believe that board service is a rite of passage. We don't have a lot of formal rites of passage in our culture. And I think most of us remember the first time we were invited to serve on a board, and I do think of it as a rite of passage. I think of it as an invitation to take responsibility for something that you care about. It's an invitation to leadership. And I think of a boardroom as a leadership laboratory. While we have officers and we have executive committees, everybody has an equal vote in a boardroom. And this shared leadership model is hard work. It's hard to throw a bunch of people in a room together and try to make decisions. So I think we have to address that and be comfortable with that kind of ambiguity of this work. And then my favorite is you serve on a board, you do not sit on a board. Back when I first got involved in nonprofits, it was the late 90s. I was in Atlanta, and you would have 50, 60 people on a board. United Way of Atlanta, Metro Atlanta would have 50, 60 people on it. We had people sitting on boards, not serving on boards. And so what you'll see now is boards are getting much, much smaller. I think I had that in a previous slide. Sorry. I think our boards now are about 15 people as an average board size, when we used to have, and that number has just been getting smaller and smaller and smaller over the years. So we're seeing boards get much more, get much more focused, much more lean in the work that they're doing. So to just kind of continue on this a little bit, this is the work that I do with clients. So feel free to interrupt or ask a question if this doesn't make sense, but this is how I approach work with clients. I believe that boards who assess their own performance perform better. That's a proven thing. Board Source has done that research. When we have boards assessing their own performance, they will automatically and intuitively understand what they're doing well and what they're not doing so well. And then they'll self-identify that and be able to come up with an action plan to support themselves. So the way that the Board Source talks about this, they talk about three major buckets that boards are responsible for. Boards are responsible for setting the strategic direction of the organization. Boards are responsible for ensuring there's adequate resources for the organization. That's resources with a big R. That's staff, that's money, that's technology, that's infrastructure. Do you have the resources necessary to accomplish the strategy and the strategic direction that we're going in? And then boards are responsible for providing oversight. And so I'll walk you very, very quickly through 10 roles and responsibilities that fall in these three areas. And what I invite you to do, if you're a board member or you work with a board, this is a little bit of the deep dive work that I do with boards, is assess yourself. So sometimes we can do red light, yellow light, green light, or we can say this needs work, we're doing well on this, or we can literally grade ourselves. We have an A+ in this area and an F in this area. And so I'll walk you through that a little bit. You can sort of think about it through the lens of your own organization, through kind of the wisdom of your own experience. So that big bucket, set strategic direction. It is the board's job to determine the mission and purpose of the organization. That means, are you using the mission to help guide discussions? Are you using the mission to set your strategic direction? Have you evaluated your mission statement, which I think right now they're saying about every 3 years is the best practice? Do you have an effective plan in place? That means your annual plan. That means succession plan. That means your financial plan. Do you have the plans in place? So again, when you think about an assessment, walk through these and ask yourself, ask your board members, are we doing this well, or do we need to work on this? What grade would you give yourself? A+, F. When you think about these two roles and responsibilities under setting strategic direction. Then we move into that second bucket, ensuring adequate resources. And there's a few more under here. It is the board's job to ensure adequate financial resources. Are we doing this well? Do we need to work on this? It's the board's job to select the CEO or executive director. It is the board's job to build the board, right? It's the board you have is the board you build, and it's the board's job to do that work. Are you doing that well? Do you need to work on that? And then it is the board's job to enhance the organization's public standing. So that is, are they being a good cheerleader? Are they being a good advocate? Do they have the tools that they need to do that? And, they assess themselves. We're doing this well, we need to work on it. And then we give them the opportunity to assess their performance under this final and third bucket, which is providing oversight. So it's the board's job to ensure that there's legal and ethical oversight for the organization. So some questions here are, are we following our bylaws and are we in compliance? It could be, do we have conflict of interest policies, or are we doing the things that we're supposed to be doing around legal and ethical oversight? Number 8 is protecting assets and providing financial oversight. Are we doing this well? Do we need to work on it? Supporting and evaluating the executive director and CEO. When I'm doing these self-assessments with my clients, this is a really hone in on this one pretty hard. Supporting the ED. What you'll find with board sources data is that when they ask board chairs and executive directors about this particular one, the boards think they're doing a really good job on this. They'll grade themselves an A+. The executive directors will give them a C-. So there's a lot of confusion kind of in the marketplace about what does support look like. So if you are an executive director or if you are a board chair, it's really important to me and to the work that you're doing, to the missions that you're serving, that you sit down and talk about what support looks like for the executive director. What support looks like for me may look very different from Ronald. And so to have a lot of clarity there, whether that's, some of us use the love languages or Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or all of the different things, but we're very different and unique people. And I'll sit down with EDs and they're like, I'm not feeling the kind of support from my board. And you sit down with the board chair and they're like, well, I don't know why not. We're saying yes to everything that he or she has asked for. So they think that rubber stamping what the ED wants is what support is, and it's really not. The ED is looking for a thought leader. The ED is looking for a different kind of support. So having some real clear conversations about that is important. And then the final one under providing oversight is about monitoring and strengthening programs and services. And so this, I teach a class in program evaluation to some graduate students over at the University of Georgia, and I am not seeing this show up as much in the boardroom as I think it could. How do we educate our board members about how we measure impact? How do we know if what we're doing is succeeding? And so I think there's some work to be done there. And if you guys are doing some things that are working in that area, how do you let your board members know how you measure success? And how often are you having that conversation in the boardroom? And how much do they really understand what success looks like, and how feedback from the people that you're serving influences the strategic direction of the organization? So there's some work to be done there, at least in the communities that I'm working with and serving. So again, that's just a very quick and dirty, it's just some shared language. It's a great neutral place to start having conversations with your board about how they're performing. I take those 10 roles and responsibilities and go through them quickly. At a board meeting, sometimes I'll just have them on the back of a board agenda to say, how are we doing? It's a good dashboard and again, some good neutral language to say, this is our job. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And not always just leave that to the staff to determine. And then what I'll often do with them is then say, kind of break them up into small groups, have them do that assessment work on their own, break them up into some small groups, and then say, what are 3 things that we think we're doing really, really well? And then what are 3 things that we think we need to work on? And that can really set the direction for the next 6 to 12 months. Then you can really hone in on what they need to work on, and you can really celebrate the things that they're doing well. Okay. We're going to move on to the board meeting. Okay, that's the meat and the sandwich today that we came to talk about. So I want to make sure that we spend some time on this, and that you also have an opportunity at the end to tell me what's working for you and what's not working for you, where you might have some questions. So let's kind of dive into the board meeting. I believe very, very deeply that the nonprofit boardroom should be home to the most robust, creative, strategic, interesting conversations in the community. I am so surprised when I walk into a boardroom and I see some of the most well-connected, generous people sitting around a table, and I am seeing very, very boring meetings. I think they should be creative and robust and interesting and strategic. You should really be selling tickets to your board meetings. They should be that interesting. The work that we're doing is too important to have really crummy board meetings. So how do we do that? So this is when I say everything that I just told you, can set it on fire. I mean, that's all those roles and responsibilities. They're very important. That self-assessment work is very important. But it really is not about the rules and regulations. It's the way people work together. So what we really want to do is create a culture in our boardroom of curiosity. We want to create a culture in our boardroom of trust. And how do we begin to do that? Because it's the relationships they have with and between each other that's really going to make your board successful. So let's look a little bit. I love this slide. I don't know where I got this picture from. I apologize to the person who created this beautiful little snapshot of the history of the mobile phone, because I use it all the time, but I have no idea where I got it. So I like this slide because it really shows you the evolution of the world that we lived in. I had this little sort of navy blue Nokia for a very long time. I moved on to my BlackBerry. I have not moved on to quite this fancy folded phone yet. I'm not even sure I've actually seen one of those. Maybe other people on this call have one. That's really cool. I'm not quite that fancy yet, but this is how the world has evolved, okay? So several years ago, I was president of Historic Athens, which is our local historic preservation nonprofit, and we were celebrating a 50-year anniversary. And I was digging around through some archives and we were going to be having this event. We were pulling out some old documents, and I found some old agendas from Historic Athens from like 1967 or 1968. And I pulled out these agendas, and y'all, the agendas looked exactly like the agendas that we were using at our current board meetings. 50 years later, we were using the same agenda, and it looks a little bit like this. Okay. And so if this is you, it is okay, because we're going to change it up today. But if the agenda is looking like this, we are going to approve minutes. We are going to review our financial statements. We have some kind of lackluster committee reports, maybe an executive director report. We have this sort of ambiguous old business, new business, and then we adjourn. This is kind of the way that we've been doing meetings. And I think that we can do better. This does not create a way for us to have the kind of robust, creative conversations that our boards and the missions that we're serving deserve. So I'm going to give you a few ideas on how to improve that. So here is kind of a great illustration. We want some fiduciary, right? We want some opportunity to have some fiduciary conversation. That means our oversight. We want some opportunity at every board meeting to have some strategic discussion around our goals. And then we want some conversation at every board meeting to be generative, meaning brainstorming, idea sharing, et cetera. And that's really where we're seeing great governance happen. I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions on how to do that. So better boards start with better board meetings. I do, as I said, think you should have some built-in time for connecting. That means have food at your board meetings, have people show up 20 minutes early and grab a snack, a cookie, lunch, whatever the thing is. But I do believe that board members need to have these kind of micro relationships with each other and an opportunity to connect on a personal level before they get into the meeting of the business. I like a consent agenda. If you're not familiar with that, I'll go into it a little bit. It's not for everyone. If you're a young nonprofit or a new-ish nonprofit, it's not necessarily a great idea. But if you're kind of in a routine, a consent agenda kind of lumps together and packages together what I consider things that are kind of routine and procedural at every board meeting. Your financial statements, committee reports, minutes from the last board meeting, that we package all that together, send it out ahead of time, and vote on it as a single item, so that we're not spending time in our board meetings doing that kind of routine and procedural stuff. I don't think it's a great idea for young organizations or organizations that are in a lot of a leadership transition or in a major campaign where you really need your eyes and ears on the financials in a different way. If you're not robust enough to have a finance committee, there are reasons that you would want to look at that at every board meeting. But if you are just going through the motions of those agenda items, it might be time for you to create a consent agenda policy. Then you can open up some space on your agenda where you're really creating an agenda that's based on your strategic goals. I also believe very much that all agenda items should have a timestamp and a purpose. So for example, if you have a strategic initiative to expand into expand programs into 2 nearby counties, then that's on your agenda as your expansion plan. And then what you're wanting is a timestamp. We're going to talk about this for about 15 minutes, and the purpose is that we need to come to a decision, or the purpose is that we're just brainstorming, or the purpose is we need to create a task force to dive deeper on this. So that when, as a board member, I'm sitting there, I know how long we're going to be talking about this, and I know my expectation. You want me to brainstorm with you. You want me to be a thought partner with you. You need a decision on this. You need what? What do you need from this board on this agenda item? And kind of thinking about it in that fiduciary, strategic, and generative way. And a lot of times I just want something on the agenda that's like, let's just bounce some ideas around. The purpose of this agenda item is to brainstorm. That's it. And we're going to brainstorm together for about 20 minutes. And then we table it. And then we bring it back to the next meeting with some more decision points. I also am a big believer in kind of education and inspiration for boards. That's going to be a couple of suggestions on a worksheet that Ronald will share with you at the end. Having a TED Talk, an article. I do book clubs a lot of time with board members, a podcast, a deep dive on your mission or your issue. Give them a shared experience. Give them and your staff, if that's appropriate, something that they can watch together, look at, read, come back to the table, and the same thing. Let's have a 15-minute conversation about this TED Talk that we watched last time. Let's do some brainstorming and see how it might affect the work that we're doing here together. Better relationships and better board roles. So again, a lot of you are probably doing this already, but strong board mentoring. I think having a more seasoned board member partnered up with a new board member is a really, really great idea. Your board orientations should be by the board and for the board. So a lot of times I'll see staff running board orientations, but I think it's an important role for board members to play in orienting and onboarding and welcoming new board members. So how do we redesign board orientations so that we're ensuring that the board is responsible for doing that work? And then I love a role play. So if any of you are in Rotary or any civic organizations, there's always a greeter at Rotary, right? There's always someone there with your name tag to welcome you and greet you. I love having a greeter at a board meeting. It makes new board members feel welcome. It really sets the tone. So just assign someone, hey, Nancy, would you mind being the greeter at our board meeting today? And that just gives someone at the door a chance to say welcome, and here's where you're sitting, and here's your packet, and grab a cookie or whatever that thing is. If you do timestamp your agenda, it's nice to have a timekeeper. Ground rules, I think, are important for any meeting. No cell phones, no, whatever those things are, to have some ground rules around your meeting. I love a dumb questions team. It really gives people permission to ask dumb questions. It's a great role for your seasoned board member and new board member to partner up together and be like, hey, could you two just ask a million dumb questions? We're going to be brainstorming about this one specific item for about 20 minutes, but we'd love to have a couple of people in the room that would just ask a whole bunch of dumb questions to help us get out of the box. I have contrarian on here. This is I used to call it a devil's advocate. It's fun to hand someone an index card when they walk in and invite them to be devil's advocate at the board meeting so that they just argue with everything anybody says. It can be a very playful way to get people kind of out of their normal routine. I worked with some faith-based organizations. They didn't like devil's advocates. We started calling it a contrarian, but call it devil's advocate, call it contrarian. It also works really well if you have a natural contrarian on your board. It gives them an opportunity to take a break from that role if you offer it to someone else. And again, it can just be a playful thing. It can be temporary. Just for the next 20 minutes as we kind of work through this new idea or this new strategy, can you just, can we have a couple of people asking dumb questions? We have a couple of folks just serving as a contrarian. I think it just helps generate better discussion and gets your board in the habit and in a culture of having more robust conversations. I also recommend that when, I'm a big believer in strong board attendance, but life is life, and not everybody can come to everything all the time. So if you cannot show up to a board meeting, it is important that someone in that room reaches out to that person who wasn't able to attend and updates them on what was going on. So I know Ronald can't be at the board meeting. And so I'm going to raise my hand. Someone at the board meeting will say, who's going to share this information with Ronald? And I don't mean, hey, Ronald, here's a copy of the minutes. I mean, hey, Ronald, we had this really robust conversation. Um, this person was a contrarian. This was kind of where we landed on it. It was really important. We missed you being there. It helps create some accountability. It lets people know they were missed. And it ensures that they don't go a month and just have minutes to reflect everything that happened at that board meeting. So I think it's and so at the end of every board meeting, we just say who wasn't able to attend or who maybe had to leave early or whatever the thing is, and who's going to call them within the next 48 hours and just give them, a 10-minute debrief on what happened at this board meeting. It's a really lovely way to engage people and to ensure that people feel like their voice matters and that we don't want them to go too long without hearing what happened. I think having small group discussions at board meetings is really helpful, just breaking your board up into groups of 2 or 3 as they kind of tease out some different ideas. That can be really helpful as well. And then I'll just say a kind of quick note on executive session. People aren't using executive session. So executive session is it's kind of a meeting within a meeting. So it's maybe the last 15 or 20 minutes of the meeting where any non-voting member of the board and any staff leave. And we just have voting board members in the room to say, is there anything that we need to talk about? This is a great way to create accountability. It's a great way to ensure that they're taking their job seriously as board members. It's a great way for them to say, hey, I'm not sure that Nancy is feeling really supported right now as executive director. Have we looked at her salary structure? Did you guys know it was her birthday next week? It's just a nice way to have a conversation without staff in the room. And if we get in the habit of having those executive sessions, then they don't feel so weird. Because sometimes it's like we go into executive session, it sounds like really serious and super scary, when really it could just be part of the culture and part of the routine that the last 10 minutes or so of every meeting, the staff excuse themselves. So that's a thought. Doesn't work for everyone, but it's a suggestion. And then a little bit more here on better structure. So this is just a new thing I'm seeing, so I'll be curious. It's Nancy's birthday. Happy birthday, Nancy. I intuitively knew that about you. A little bit more about better structure of board meetings. So this is just something I've noticed with some clients recently. So I'll be curious if you're seeing this in your communities and in your nonprofits. Is this a warning about executive committees? Executive committees are not a bad thing in and of themselves. But what I am seeing is that when you have a very, very strong executive committee that is meeting regularly, it can make the rest of the board feel like that their work doesn't matter. So I've seen that. I probably have 2 or 3 clients right now where they have a really strong executive committee, which seems like a great thing, and it is. You have 4 or 5 people that are super committed. They have a lot of institutional knowledge. They've been around for a long time. They've risen up through the ranks. They're in these positions for a reason. But they're also not necessarily sharing a lot of information with the rest of the board. It's happening a little bit in a silo, and the rest of the board members at a board meeting can feel like, oh, I guess you guys have already met and talked about this, so I'm not really sure what you need from me other than a vote. So we're kind of missing an opportunity to really engage the full board in discussions if your executive committee is too strong. Another trend that I see happening is what's called zero-based committee structures. So again, this one can be really contentious for some people, and some people really like it. But this is where at the beginning of every year, you just zero out committees. You sunset every committee that you have. You then create your strategic goals for the year. What are the things that we're working on for the next 12 to 18 months? And you build a committee structure that supports your strategic initiatives. And so sometimes those may be similar kinds of committee structure, but they have much more intention and purpose behind them. So that, every year they're zeroed out, and every year we recreate a committee structure that's super specific to what we're trying to accomplish in the next 12 to 18 months. And then I believe that there always needs to be a couple of people on your board that are focused strictly on board culture. what kind of board culture do we want to have? Who's going to be in charge of board assessments? Fun things like icebreakers to help board members get to know each other better. A couple of folks who are going to send out meeting evaluations. How did you like this meeting? Is the meeting time and location working for you? Did you enjoy the meeting? Did you not? We're not really spending a lot of time on, we need a couple of people assigned at every board that's sort of saying, how are we doing as a board? Nancy's asking about bylaws. So that's a great question. And I think that the rule of thumb right now, and this has changed, I think this is might be what you call a next practice, not a best practice, is that we're not talking committee structure in bylaws, that the committee structure should be more, and I think this is coming a lot out of a COVID world where the bylaws should be strictly about governance, and committees really should be more of a policy and an addendum to those bylaws and not built into the bylaws. So Board Source has a really, I think it's Board Source that has an interesting article about that as well. Let's see. So meeting evaluations would be the last one on there. I think meeting evaluations a couple of times a year is important, kind of gives your board a chance to say what's working and not working about your board meetings. So that's that's really where I kind of close out. It's a lot of just very simple tips and tricks, and we can spend a little bit of time exploring those in more detail at the end of this call. But I did want to just spend a few minutes framing up a conversation around philanthropy and fundraising because it is such a hot topic. But we'll roll through these in just about 5 minutes or so and give us a chance to have some more, specific conversations and answer specific questions. So philanthropy and fundraising. Okay, y'all. So I like to start with this picture when I talk about fundraising, because this is the big fat elephant in the room that for some reason, and I'm not sure why, but we just see it and we know it, and it's huge and it's omnipresent and it's big and fat and stinky and it's right there, and we just are somehow unable to address it. And that is that we are talking about money, and that people are weird about money, okay? We all are weird about money. We have hangups about money. We live in a society. We have media and entertainment and our families, structures, and our parents and our siblings, and we were taught to be weird about money. We all think about money really, really differently. So it is not surprising that this becomes a really big issue in a boardroom, because never are we really addressing, assessing, or having deep conversations about the values that people attach to money. It's just, I don't know. I mean, we just have hangups about money. That's just how it is. And so that to me is, and we're taught, and I assume it's like this everywhere, but I can certainly tell you it's like this in the South. It's impolite to talk about money. It's certainly impolite to ask people for money. So we have to begin to address that. And I recommend having a series of conversations in your boardroom about what does money mean to them? What values are you attaching to money? How do we kind of get out of this fear of it and into the excitement of asking someone to invest in a cause that we really deeply care about? So I think until we're comfortable talking about how uncomfortable it is, we just don't seem to make any progress. So one of the things that Board Source, they put out this Leading with Intent best practices. This is from June 2021. Again, this is downloadable and free on their website. Really, really interesting information. But their key findings, and I'll just talk about this one that's highlighted, is that boards are prioritizing fundraising above everything else, and they're doing it at the expense of strategy, relevance, and impact. So I think we're overemphasizing fundraising on our boards right now. It is one of the 10 roles and responsibilities, which means it is 1/10 of their job as a board member. But somehow we've gotten into an era of fundraising boards, and I just need my board to raise money. I just need my board to raise money, and that's it. And I think we're missing the mark on that. It's not, kind of go back to, why do people serve? What motivates and inspires people to serve on boards? And it's not so they can go out and raise money. That is not a motivation for anybody. So again, we're kind of beating our heads against a brick wall, and we're trying to do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. It's just not working. So there has to be a solution to this problem. We are not going to figure it out today, but I do think we have to call out some of the elephants in the room and say, we might be overemphasizing it. We we may not be as sensitive about how difficult conversations around money are with people and how people feel about money and react to money and their own motivations about money. So we have to kind of expand our definition of fundraising and really educate the board a little bit differently. So this is a slide that I completely stole from some wonderful women who were presenting at an AFP conference a few years ago, Association of Fundraising Professionals. There's a lot of ways board members can get involved in fundraising, right? And you'll see this little tiny red, for those of you on the call who are fundraisers, this little red triangle here is the tiniest part. It's what we spend most of our time focusing on, but it's the tiniest part of the work. So how do we engage boards in thanking, identifying, and involving donors, and that this ask is not the number one thing? That may be just a staff role, or you may have one or two board members who will partner up with staff to do this. So we're asking board members to do something that they're just not asked to do, that they're just never going to be able to do, and we're not really showing them this whole piece of the pie. So I'm really big on, again, back to the elephant in the room. This is scary, scary stuff. When we want board members to just make the ask and we talk about fundraising as just the ask, it is paralyzing fear, uncertainty, not safe, no predictable outcome. I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to be rejected. I don't know how to do it. And I literally could lay down and die. I mean, that is the kind of fear that people feel when they are being told they have to ask for money. So instead, I say give them the opportunity to thank. I love this movie. I can't remember. It's the Elf. Is that what it's called? I love it. He just has this most sort of radical appreciation for life, and I think that. To me, it's more important for boards and for organizations to have a culture of this radical and immediate gratitude, and engaging your board in that process is more important to me and more meaningful than just having them out there asking for money. So I think we have some work to do here. It's not a huge solution to the problem, but it is a solution. I also think just educating the board on philanthropy is really important. So I think these numbers are from 2021 or 2020. We raised about $470 billion in this country in private support. And that money, and these are slides from Giving USA. They're also pretty easy to find on the internet. Most of that money is coming from individuals. Very tiny amount is coming from corporations. This is the kind of data that can help your board get out of wanting to ask businesses for money and into stewarding individuals for money. That all depends on your revenue model and how you fundraise. But I think that boards sort of default to businesses because it's much easier to be turned down by Coca-Cola than it is to be turned down from my neighbor Margie over here, right? Like Margie saying no to me is a lot harder on me and more sensitive for me than Coca-Cola turning me down. So but we see, and we all know, and we're all smart fundraisers here, that most of that money is coming from individuals. We have to have individual portfolios as part of our fundraising mix, and we've got to really engage and educate our board on the data behind why we're asking them to do this. This is a real big light bulb moment for a lot of boards. They have no idea about this. This information alone can really shift perspective. And then where is that money going? This is another great slide to just educate and inform and help frame fundraising and philanthropy for your board. Where does the money go? It's going to religion, education, human services. So depending on the kind of mission that you're working in, this can also be a really helpful piece of information. And then the other thing I like to share with boards, and this is something that you've probably read about in the headlines, but maybe you haven't had a conversation with your board about, we're experiencing the largest transfer of wealth right now in the history of time. A lot of information out there. Great Wall Street Journal articles on the transfer of wealth. All you have to do is Google transfer of wealth and you will be, there is unlimited amount of really well-documented information about this. Has never happened in the history of time. We are expected to see transfers of close to $70 trillion over the next 20 years. That's $9.6 billion a day, every single day for 20 years. It is a tremendous amount of money. And I know we are living in uncertain times, but that doesn't change. This money is going to go somewhere. So is it going to be distributed evenly and equitably among all people? No, we all know that that's not how it works. But I think it's an important thing for your board to have a conversation about. It can really help them understand the importance of bringing on younger board members. It can really help them understand why you might want to do a young philanthropist committee or a young board, advisory group. So again, using data to help inform, educate, and design strategy based on this information can be really, really helpful. Now, I'm going to close this out a little bit silly, but I can't comprehend $9.6 billion. So I've tried really hard, and I've asked, a lot of people how to conceptualize that money. So I'll just share this last slide with you, and this is just $1 billion. So this is what I've learned on the internet, that Buckingham Palace is valued at $2.9 billion, and the Atlanta Braves, that's here in my home state, and this is when they won the World Series, so this may have gone down a little bit, but they are valued at about $1.8 billion. And this is a private island in the Bahamas that's for sale right now for $75 million. It's on Craigslist, so I'm not sure it's legitimate, but it gives you an idea of what you might be able to purchase. That's not even as much money as being transferred in one single day, and this transfer of wealth is happening in this country. So we tend to have this scarcity mindset. I don't think there's money out there. We've tapped out. We don't know anybody. We don't know rich people, blah, all of these excuses. But the reality is there's a tremendous amount of wealth out there, and it's being passed down day after day after day. And so it's just, how do we target, get creative, and create some systems and strategies that are going to respond to this stuff that we already know is happening in the world. Okay, that was really, really fast. I'm curious to hear from you. Any discussion, ahas, or curiosities that you want to share in our last few minutes together? I'm happy to do that.
Victoria, this was absolutely fabulous.
Thank you.
I really like those 10 points about assessing the board's performance, because I can even see turning that into almost a score.
Yes.
That if I take those 10 things and I give myself a 1, a 2, or a 3, and then I tally those up, and if I'm below a certain number, well, that tells me, wait, we got some things to work on, and we've identified what those things are.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is fabulous, and I appreciate you kind of delving into a little bit into the fundraising as well. I want to hit some of the questions that we got as part of the registration. I really appreciate people sending some questions in as you registered. So I'm going to just fire a few of these at you here. So we had a question from Roberta. She says that their community foundation has 4 meetings per year. And one area that they need assistance is generating sort of door openers so that more people in the community know about them. So it sounds like, any unique ideas, to motivate. It sounds like maybe they're struggling maybe with recruiting board members, or having the board members kind of work on that advocacy side. One of those 10 things that you talked about.
Yeah. That's such a good one. And I think, and this may not be helpful to Roberta, but and other people in the room may have a better ideas. But one thing I've learned, we talk a lot about asking board members to kind of, and this will date me a little bit, but asking board members to open their, I always want to say Rolex, but it's Rolodex, open their Rolodex. But I don't think it's really helpful. And I think when we ask boards like, who do you know? Well, everybody gets like stuck. They're like, I don't know who I know. So since we live in this world of our cell phones and our Google calendars, what I have started doing is asking my board members, would you look in your calendar and just take a look at, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, places who are you meeting with? What rooms are you showing up in? And how can you put on the hat of this organization in that room? Because it'll help them think outside the box. Oh, my plumber's coming. I have a Rotary meeting. I'm having lunch with my sister-in-law. She might be interested. I mean, it'll just kind of help them if we think about calendars versus contacts, that can kind of help board members have a different way of thinking about who to invite to an event like Roberta's speaking of. I don't know if that's helpful, but
just get them thinking about the situations that they're in. And oftentimes just be thinking about sharing the mission of the organization, because you're doing that, you are discussing the mission, not just in the boardroom, but it's your job to be out there just kind of telling people, hey, I'm on this board and these are the good things that we're doing. So
Yeah.
we have a question from Julia, and she's just kind of mentioned draft agendas and format for financial and committee reporting. I'm assuming that might kind of go towards those minutes, and are there kind of standard formats for how you are reporting financials and the work of various committees within the kind of better framework that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it always just depends on the organization and how the staff time that you can invest, or the board treasurer's time. I'm seeing more people present financials as a narrative instead of as a spreadsheet, so that they can have that spreadsheet, but attached to that spreadsheet, there's like, here are the three things that we would want you to pay attention to, and here, like, kind of the same like you were talking about, Ronald. It's a little bit of a scorecard. Here's our red light stuff, yellow light stuff, and green light stuff. Here's where we're kind of over budget, under budget, and it's a different way of visualizing it for people. That might be helpful. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Just don't, because numbers,
Oof,
everybody can interpret a number a certain
differently.
way. Yes.
Yes.
You put a narrative on that, it might work a little better. So speaking of numbers, we did get a couple of submitted questions about how to get board members to fundraise. I did want to note that in the chat, I have put a link to a webinar that we did last year about basically how to help board members overcome their fear and motivate them to fundraise. And one of the things that we did go over is the things that you're talking about too, is let's say you have somebody that there's lots of fundraising activities. You can be the thank you person. You can be
Right.
the identifying person. You can be the asking person, and figuring out where to put the board members into those right roles so you can be successful.
Yeah.
And I know Meg had a question specifically about kind of how to turn board members into kind of volunteer fundraisers using us here at For Good Cause. And that is something that we've seen. I'm going to drop another article right now from our blogs about turning board members into peer-to-peer fundraisers. And then I'm going to drop an example from one of our clients. And what you'd be looking at here on this landing page, if you kind of look at the right, you'll see a list of board members. And these guys are board members of this nonprofit. And what this charity did is, okay, we've got some board members. It's tough for them to ask. They're confused how to ask, how to tell the story, being comfortable asking. So let's give them a website that has their story and their picture, and they can share that.
Yes.
They can send that. We'll give them a script to send that out over email. We'll give them a talking points to talk about that. And they have this URL and they can just share it. Give to me. You can even create competition around it where the board members are competing, to see who can raise the most money. You could put time limitations on it, do it once a year, invite new board members into that type of fundraising. Just give them the tools. Use the web to give them the tools that will make it easy for them to fundraise. So check out that article. Check out the webinar that we did last year. There'll be a lot of good tips on there about the combination of board members and fundraising. Just a couple of final questions here. We've got one. How do we retain and attract the right board members for our mission? Now, are you looking at mission when you're thinking about who am I recruiting to be board members, and how do you find that person that's a good fit before they get into there and you start the training? Or can you even identify that, and it really takes that training for you to figure out if they are going to be a fit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I've seen a couple of my clients right now, if they have a potential board member, they're just asking them to come and sit in on 2 or 3 meetings, and then they're having a conversation with them about if it feels like the right fit for them. So that can be another way to kind of help screen, I guess. And then I just am a big believer in knowing where is the organization going, and is it the right board for right now? So I think we're kind of moving out of, you still see these board matrix sort of things online. We need a lawyer, we need a banker, we need a blah, and I don't think those are bad, but I think it's kind of missing the mark on, but what do we need right this second that might not fill these gaps? So yeah, interesting.
Right. I like the preview idea. Come sit in.
Come sit in.
See if you
Check us
like it.
out.
It's like a little sales job too.
That's right.
Right. We're a great board. You want to be here. We're going to do fun things and have these very engaged, fun, creative meetings
That's
that you're
exactly
talking
right.
about. Victoria, I know you have a handout. I'm going to drop this now. So if everybody will look on the right, you will be able to download this great little board engagement checklist of all the things that Victoria's been talking about. So download that now. I'm going to share my slides again so I can kind of hit on the final stuff here. So I really appreciate everybody attending today. Victoria, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I hope that, there's some little things here they can go back to their next board meeting and say, hey, can we try one thing here? Can we try two things to just try and get our board meetings up to another level? Because then that more support is going to trickle down all the way into the staff people that are using our software that want more support in the fundraising. Again, I'll be sending out a recording. If not tomorrow, look for an email from me on Friday. If you're watching this on demand later, this is my contact information here. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you have. You certainly can also reach out to Victoria, or through me, I'll get a question to her if anything didn't get answered. Once I close out the webinar today, you will be automatically redirected to a survey. Please let us know how we did today. We appreciate any feedback. Let me know the types of guests and things you want to see us talk about here at For a Good Cause. Victoria, thanks again, and thank you for everybody for attending and what you're doing in your community. And we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hooray.